Welcome back to The Full View. We're still unpacking the UDM election manifesto launch, which took place in Port Elizabeth today. We're still on education. Professor Kotze, Jolene Kotze, I'm sure you can hear us now. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Prof, we were talking about education, the issue of education. We saw General Bantu Holomisa criticize President Cyril Ramaphosa when he spoke about advanced technology for our schools, but yet in the Eastern Cape, you have the issue of mud schools. And I mean, just last year, we had a 5-year-old child who had fallen into a pit toilet and died.
No, look, I mean, you look generally at the issue of education, but it actually goes further than that. It's not just basic education. It's not just basic health care. It is issues of basic service delivery on essentials that people need in order to advance for social mobility. So there has been some huge deficits within the various public departments, especially in the Eastern Cape and other provinces, if you think of Limpopo and other poorer provinces as well. So in terms of flagging issues of education, I think the key thing that you need to look at here is getting a functional public service, but more importantly, looking at the political dynamic between the teachers' unions and how and the power it wields almost, so to speak, over the Department of Education. So as much as one is saying you want to bring back school inspectors, you want to bring back all of these things, there are certain grassroots issues that you do need to deal with, not just in terms of providing infrastructure and funding, but actually looking at the human dynamic and the political dynamic between the department, the unions, and a power dynamic that tends to play out there.
Speaking to my colleague Lerato Tipa, who you spoke to a bit earlier on today when you were doing live crossings from the stadium itself, on the issue of coalitions, she said in her live crossing that the UDM is not there to win it. The UDM basically, has its mayor, Mongameli Bobani, in charge in Nelson Mandela Bay with the help of the ANC. Now, this is what he had to say on coalition governments. Let's take a listen to this and we'll unpack it in just a moment.
I also want to touch on the issue of possible coalition governments after this year's elections. If it should deliver no outright winner, as forecast by political analysts, the question of coalitions arises. In this regard, the UDM is of the view that any coalition government should be regulated so that the principles of serving the people are not suppressed by wanton political intimidation and playing the numbers game that typifies the present local government dispensation. Hence, it is important that coalition partners iron out their relationship directly after elections and publish their compacts so that voters clearly understand how that coalition will work and to have a set of standards to measure any coalition government's performance.
Now, Professor, let me stay with you. Of course, the UDM clear on coalitions. Of course, it is in the Nelson Mandela Bay. It has Mayor Mongameli Bobani there on its relationship with the African National Congress. But, I mean, what do we judge from the sentiment that he is sharing? Perhaps him or the UDM not minding, if they can, jumping into bed with other political parties to make sure that the UDM itself does maintain some semblance of presence within the Eastern Cape, for example.
You know, I think one has to kind of look at the broader context as well, bearing in mind that originally the UDM went into a coalition government with the Democratic Alliance. And due to some, shall we say, disagreements, some personal factional politics maybe playing out, of course that coalition broke and we saw the UDM siding with the ANC in order to create a new coalition government. As much as UDM President Bantu Holomisa is highlighting that you need to iron out issues for a coalition straight after the election, I would differ in my opinion, because we have to remember coalitions are by virtue marriages of convenience. So if you are going into this marriage, you need to know beforehand what the issues are that you are going to deal with, what are the key priority issues that you want to tackle, and how you are going to tackle that.
Yeah.
You cannot iron out those issues as you establish a new government. It has to happen before.
Spoo, would you agree with that? The UDM essentially saying, we saw the alliance that it had with the Democratic Alliance, crumble quite spectacularly. Now it's got this alliance with the African National Congress. By nature, I think I would agree with the Prof there, that, coalition politics, you always have each political party trying to fight for its own survival and trying to push their own agenda ahead of their coalition partner.
Obviously, as the professor says, Griselda, the nature of coalition governments is just marriages of convenience. To me, what I hear the General Holomisa, to me it sounds typical political speak, because the whole issue, the whole point of being in politics is pursuit of political power, and all political parties want to be in power. It is well and good to publish the compact after the elections, but you and I know very well that those coalitions are driven by interests and personalities. So I think, if you look at also the time spent on coalition governments, it was very little. Spent very little time, and the UDM is the biggest beneficiary of coalition governments, both after the 2016 elections and also both the recent ousting of Athol Trollip in last year, August. But what that tells you is that it's not about the principle. It is about political power, and that is what at the end of the day it's about, because that is why the UDM can go into a coalition with the DA, and when Bobani and Trollip clash, and then switches the sides to Andile Lungisa and the likes in Nelson Mandela Bay.
Is this a way for the ANC, this alliance that it has with the UDM, of course informing that alliance to get Bobani as a mayor? Is this the ANC's way of getting its foot back into politics of Nelson Mandela Bay? And what do you foresee for Bobani going forward? Because already with these allegations of maladministration and corruption that he faces, he is likely to face much more stiff criticism from the smaller parties.
Obviously, the UDM will have to actually be honest, as the professor said earlier. I do understand that when the allegations of corruption against Mongameli Bobani came up, that they did indicate that they would look into his bank statements. Now, I would like to think that bank statements are pretty straightforward in terms of filtering through them. And if you can, there are audit companies that can do that within a short space of time. So on that score, it is up to the UDM and also the law enforcement agencies to come up. But I would advise General Bandu Holomisa that if he is to be trusted, that he actually makes the conclusion of that investigation public very soon. But I think in this particular election, obviously the ANC is looking to regain the support that it lost in Nelson Mandela Bay. And you will remember that the DA benefited from the ANC's chaos. And this time around, the ANC is hoping to benefit from the DA's chaos, because the DA is in shambles in Nelson Mandela Bay and other areas.
Well, let's go on to other issues now. Let's unpack the issue of safety and security. Of course, what brings to mind, first of all, let me come back to you, Professor, on this one. The National Prosecuting Authority, of course, with a new boss at the helm, Shamila Batohi. She's touted as someone who's going to change around the fortunes of the NPA after going through a rough patch. Is it quite strategic on his part to bring that issue up? The issue of state capture is one of the things that took center stage in that manifesto as well.
No, look, I think the issue of state capture, is something that all political parties will indeed address, considering that we do have the various commissions going. And it is one of the biggest, shall we say, thorns in the foot of the ANC, is dealing with high-ranking individuals who are implicated in being involved in state capture. In terms of safety and security, I'm not 100% sure, by saying that we want to bring in a ministry of crime prevention to coordinate the various departments, whether it be the Department of Constitutional Development and Justice, the policing and so forth. I think it goes back to that basic issues. The departments are there, the guidelines are there in the Constitution, and there are mechanisms for the departments to communicate with one another.
Yeah.
The key challenge is getting those departments functional, that they are actually doing what they are mandated to do. And that, of course, would require not necessarily funding, but again, going back to looking at issues around skills development, upskilling, seeing who is occupying which positions, and whether there is impartiality in how those departments function.
Spoo, I want to come to you. You know, one of the things that I also picked up here is that what the General is saying is that they'll also lobby SADC countries to seriously consider establishing an apparatus to respond to cross-border crime. Now, in South Africa, of course, there is no secret to the fact that South Africa is accused of having porous borders and is unable to deal with the issue of cross-border crime. Do you think this is a good idea, that it even stretches it beyond the borders of South Africa? Could this be something that could resonate with South Africans who are fed up with crime, who are fed up with the crime moving towards each and every border, I guess?
I mean, I think the issue of cross-border crime is not new on the political sphere, because as you would know that as South Africa participates in SADC, there are bodies that deal with that, including via the law enforcement agencies, but also there are South African SADC Customs Union, all those regional bodies that look into those kind of issues. But I think that our crime is not merely influenced by our porous borders. I think if we're to, I think those are just the views that are shared by the mayor of Johannesburg, Emin Mashawa. But generally, South Africa has a crime problem which is homegrown, besides what is coming from elsewhere. I think more than anything, it would make sense for us to deal with the social, economic issues that are resulting in crime. And I do not think that by closing borders regional borders can work together, but it doesn't stop the underlying factors that contribute to crime.
All right, Spungalwa, thank you so much for that. We'll come back to you very shortly, and also go back to Professor Jolene Steyn-Kotze, also joining this conversation, unpacking the UDM manifesto election launch. We'll take a short break here on The Full View. More when we get back.